Hostage, a Todd Mills mystery, book 3 in the series. Arthur R.D. Zimmerman, publisher, Scribble Pub. Narrator, Eric Aust. Chapter 3. If only beauty could kill. She fantasized about gunning him down with a double-barrel stare of her icy blue eyes. She thought about tripping him with one of her long legs and then stabbing him with her pointed heels. She visualized herself pouncing on him and clawing him to death. Nah, clawing wouldn't do it. Once elegant and much admired, her nails were now in shit shape. And for sure, she'd break one. Besides, it was all set up for later anyway. As she walked up Lake Street in South Minneapolis, the breeze filtering through her coiffed blonde hair, Tina pulled up the collar of her black wool coat. The sun was out, most of the snow was gone, and the ice on the lakes was melting, but there was still a bit of a chill hovering over the city. She wasn't like these kids, these die-hard Minnesotans, like that one over there on the other side of the street, bombing toward Lake Calhoun on rollerblades, wearing nothing but a t-shirt and some long shorts, or those people over there at the coffee shop, sitting outside in open jackets and drinking coffee, soaking up the sun as if it were July. Oh no, she still hadn't shaken the chill of this past winter, and she didn't feel as if she ever would, particularly given how lousy she'd been feeling. Her entire soul was trembling, it seemed, which was why her coat was buttoned up snugly, and why she was still wearing her leather gloves, not to mention the pale yellow turtleneck. Perhaps instead of the tasteful cream-colored skirt and white stockings, however, she should have worn slacks, something a little more casual as well as warmer. Then again, thanks to her years as a top model in New York, Tina knew how to dress for any occasion, and today, after all, she was going to see one of the most important men in the United States. Exactly, she thought as she neared the place. One of the most important men and arguably the biggest asshole of them all. She'd never thought about killing anyone before, never. Not a woman like her, once beloved in the fashion industry, even more for her congenial Minnesota temperament than her wholesome beauty. But this guy was pushing it too far. His ideas too radical. No doubt about it, if she could kill one person, it would be him. After all, someone had to stop him. Something had to be done. Tina came to the corner of Lake and Hennepin, pausing right in front of the large Gap store. Outside of downtown, this was the busiest intersection in the city, with 2- and 3-story brick buildings filling each of the corners, and while the neighborhood had once been rather borderline, it was now booming, the hippiest of the hip flocking to the trendy restaurants and shops. Even bored subordinates, ever in search of new shopping, frequented the neighborhood, especially today. Mr. Jerk himself was in there, signing his book, and there were sure to be hundreds in line, waiting for his smarmy autograph. Crossing the street in a crowd of 20 or so, Tina could tell that the flow was definitely toward him. In this block-long set of old brick buildings, a small shopping mall had been carved, and as she ducked out of the sunny, almost spring day and entered the complex, she could tell that everyone was going in and no one was going out. Great, she thought. So much for Herbert Humphrey and Walter Mondale. So much for the bleeding heart liberal Minnesotan. No wonder this guy had to be gotten rid of. Up ahead, the central atrium of this mall was packed. So she thought the crowd was so big they'd moved the entire shebang out of the bookstore. Tina drifted to the side, peered around, saw a huge line snaking this way and that. Must be, what, 400-500 people standing there waiting to meet him, Mr. Big Shot Congressman. Did all these people really agree with him? Sure, the medical system in the United States was all messed up and as expensive as hell, but did they really want Medicare slashed and medical assistance all but eliminated? What kind of country was this anyway? Where were our values? Tina hummed that old ABBA song, quietly singing, "Money, money, money makes a rich man cry." Shaking her head in disgust, she glanced to the side and caught her own reflection in a store window. She dabbed at her cheeks, tried to smooth her foundation, which she'd put on far too heavily in an attempt to cover the sores. Dear Lord, How was it possible to have aged as much as she had in the past year, with her dry blonde hair and fading skin? What horrible color! She looked as if she were over 50 instead of not even 40. Her pal, Elliot, was right. If her skin cracked and shriveled any more, she was going to have to switch her name to Patina. Forget how exhausted you are, she told herself. Just stroll along, admire the lovely shoes in the window. What nice pumps! And the sandals! What fun colors! She casually moved to the next display window, glanced over, saw the crowd, checked out their clothes, lots of khakis and loafers, lots of women with perky hair, all of them white, and all of them Republicans. But not much security. That was what she really needed to find out. Brushing a strand of hair out of her face, she moved into the open courtyard, glanced up at the balcony, then scanned the stairs. There were a couple of cops over there, another one or two by the newsstand. She surveyed the long line of eager fans. No, there didn't appear to be any FBI folk, and most important, there weren't any Secret Service men. Of that she was fairly sure, because when the president was last in town, there were guys with mirrored sunglasses and earpieces everywhere. No, it was just as they thought. This guy, his Honorable Johnny Clarendon, wouldn't get Secret Service protection until he announced his presidential bid, which everyone expected he would do in a month or so. So let's just see how close I can get, mused Tina. She sauntered forward, her heels clicking on the tile floor, and came around a column. The line of fans twisted all the way through the atrium and down to the far end, where a mass of people were gloomed around a low table. Tina bent over a bit, peered between a couple of people, and there he was. Her heart jumped. She'd seen him on TV countless times, doing his blather on CBS, NBC, ABC, and CNN, about how the country was in deep trouble with this and that, and how we needed to return to the family values that had made this country great. She'd seen him on the cover of Newsweek. His handsome face lit up, the index finger of his right hand raised high as he lectured on the problems of the national deficit, medical care, and, of course, AIDS funding, stating bluntly that now that so much progress had been made on the gay disease, research should really be left to the drug companies, since they were already reaping such enormous profits. But this was different. Seated there at a banquet table, smiling endlessly as he signed book after book, he definitely seemed not larger than life, but small. Maybe that's why Johnny Clarendon was so popular, with light brown hair rimming his bald head, a square jaw, and a charming white smile. He looked like the boy next door, and for that reason, quite possibly the next president of the United States of America. My, how she hated him, thought Tina with a fake smile, as she moved into the atrium. A leader that would inspire the best in people, he was not. So just how close could she get? "Excuse me, can I get past you?" said Tina to a young woman with a stroller. "This is so exciting. I can't stand it." "Isn't he wonderful?" replied the woman. "Well, I just can't believe it." Tina's heart clutched when she glanced down at the stroller and saw a little girl, small and blonde and adorable, for she reminded Tina so much of her own daughter. "I can't believe Johnny Clarendon is right here in Uptown." "I know. That's why I came." Her voice sweet, yet raspy, Tina begged her way closer, maneuvering in and around clumps of people, around the line of book buyers, around a fountain, and almost right there, right up to the table where the Honorable Jerk was signing his tome. She paused once to catch her breath. She'd been running a fever forever, and she really should be home in bed. Then moved on, her heart beating faster and faster. Dear God! She was so near to him. Her hand, beaded with droplets of sweat, slipped into the pocket of her coat and clutched a Kleenex. If only it were the syringe. If only she could do it right now. Suddenly, a mountain of a man slid right in front of her. "That's close enough, ma'am." Forcing the classiest of smiles, Tina looked up into gorgeous dark eyes and said, "What?" "This is a book signing, ma'am, and all these people are waiting to speak to Mr. Clarendon and have their books autographed. I'm afraid you'll have to step back a bit." "Oh, She looked him up and down, noting his chestnut brown hair, his broad shoulders. "Oh, I see. If you'd like to buy the book, they're selling it right over there," he said, pointing to a table by the fountain. "And the congressman wrote it. What's it about?" she asked, even though she knew all too well and was perfectly disgusted by it. "It's a science fiction novel." "Really? How very interesting. Do you work at the bookstore here? Have you read the book?" She lowered her voice and her lips pursed into a sly grin. "Just because he's a member of Congress doesn't mean he can write. Is it any good?" "No, I don't work at the bookstore, but a lot of people like the book." "Oh," trying to appear innocent but titillated, like many of the suburban matrons here, she asked, "So, are you his bodyguard?" "Something like that." "How fascinating." "Lyle," called a woman from behind Clarendon's table. He turned, listened to some apparent orders, then turned back to Tina. "Excuse me, but the congressman's aide would like everyone to move back a bit." "Of course." Okay, thought Tina as she retreated. So now wasn't the time, not that it was supposed to be anyway. No, just stop by, scope things out, see what you can find out. That was her job, that was what they'd instructed, and that was exactly what she'd done. Mission accomplished. Stuffing her hands in her pockets, she turned around. No need to worry, for she was going to get her 15 minutes of fame. They all would. 15 minutes and then some. Right. Mr. Johnny Clarendon's interview was going to be just ever so explosive. She moved on, treading her way through the crowd, and just as she came around an escalator, bright lights burst against her face. Several people started zooming in on her. "Oh, shit!" Tina tensed, ready to bolt. Was it the police? How could they know what she was really doing here? A woman pressed forward, some instrument held in her hand, and in an altogether perky voice said, "Hi, I'm Cindy Wilson from WTCN TV, and we're interviewing a few of Johnny Clarendon's fans at this amazingly successful book signing." Tina held up her hand to shield her eyes from the bright lights, saw that the blonde woman was in fact holding a microphone, and that the lights were from a camera, and said, "What?" "We'd like to know what you think of Johnny Clarendon. Don't worry, this is just being taped. We're running at the midday news. Any comments for WTCN TV? It couldn't hurt, not really. So what if the connection was made later on? Sure. She had a lot to say about this guy. Why not now? So Tina nodded. Okay. Great. The reporter nodded at her photographer to start taping, cleared her throat, and in her best TV voice began, "This is an amazingly successful book signing, don't you think? There must be 600 or 700 fans here, maybe more. And," as the microphone was tilted toward her, she bent forward and said, "Tina, my name's Tina, but I think there are only about 400 people here. So, have you bought your book yet?" Tina hesitated, then forced herself not to be nice, but blunt and truthful, and said, "Hell no." "Oh, I see," replied Cindy Wilson, not really sure where to take that comment. "Does that mean you're not a Johnny Clarendon fan?" "No, not at all." Oh, okay." Tina saw Cindy Wilson's eyes as she turned to her cameraman and signaled him that this wasn't a good one. Tina couldn't stop herself. She used to be so timid, so polite. Everyone liked Tina, pretty Tina from the Midwest. She never put up a fuss. She'd stay under the lights for hours until they got the perfect shot, but then in her mind's eye, Tina saw Chris, those beautiful eyes. And she reached out and grabbed for the microphone. If nothing else, God damn it, she was going to do it, for the sake of Chris alone. Tina was going to make sure the world knew just what they'd been through. That was why she was here, why she was involved in all this, after all. Not for herself, but for Chris. And there was no turning back, and there was no time like the present to start speaking out. "You know what? I want to change my mind," barked Tina. "I want Johnny Clarendon to be elected the next president of the United States of America. I also want him to contract HIV, and I want him to develop full-blown AIDS. He's been going around saying the epidemic is over. But let me tell you, if he got sick, then he'd find out it really wasn't." Shaking, Tina turned and started off. Exactly, she thought as she stormed away. If they were even the least bit successful, Clarendon would get sick. Very sick. Behind her, she heard Cindy Wilson mutter, God, Bob, I don't think we can use that one, do you? Lyle had an uneasy sense about the lady and kept his eyes on her as she wove through the crowd and disappeared behind an escalator. Behind him, Carol, the congressman's aide, scowled as she said, "What did she want?" Lyle rolled onto his toes and tried to see far into the crowd. "I'm not really sure. She was kind of weird looking, don't you think?" Pressed Carol, a very average-looking woman with brown hair, a white face, and wearing a predictable blue suit. "Did you notice all that makeup? I mean, it was caked on so thick it was falling off. At first I thought it was another one of those drag queens. It wasn't, was it?" A large man in the peak of condition, Lyle continued to scan the throng of people to be sure there was something odd about the woman, but it wasn't her sex, of that he was confident. No, it was a woman. God, then she looked like death warmed over. Lyle, not a man of many words, nodded. That was what had caught his attention in the first place, her frail demeanor, as well as the strange tone of her skin. And after the trouble that Clarendon had had on the West Coast, some AIDS activists had doused the congressman with a bucket of blood, which fortunately turned out to have been sterilized. Lyle was being especially alert. That, after all, was why Clarendon's publisher had decided to bring in someone like Lyle, just in case something like that happened again. As far as Lyle knew, though, there hadn't been any threats here in Minneapolis. "Well, be alert," Carol laughed, then kept her voice low as she said, "But you know, a lot of our people, the congressman, strategists, and so on, are hoping something else will happen. After those guys threw that crap on Congressman Clarendon in San Francisco, his popularity soared. Do you realize he gained 15 points in the polls overnight? 15 points! Christ! The publicity we got out of it was utterly phenomenal. You can't buy coverage like that, believe me." "No," said Lyle, his eyes once again searching the crowd and hoping that nothing happened while he was in charge. "I suppose you can't. It just goes to show," continued Carol, glancing over at her hero as he signed book after book, "that Congressman Clarendon is right. Good Americans are fed up with gays and their agenda, and the more shenanigans they pull, the more they prove him right. Wouldn't you agree?" Spying two well-dressed men with short hair move idly through the crowd. Men he assumed were queer. Lyle said, "Excuse me." As he stepped into the swarm of people, he put his hand inside his sport coat, resting his fingers gently on the pistol that sat snugly in his shoulder holster. Did he agree with Clarendon's position on gays? If the congressman and his aide only knew. Gay Mysteries audiobooks. I think it is easy to hate a label, but a face humanizes the word. So this effort is twofold: to offer comfort to those like myself that your world didn't end because you don't fit into the view of acceptable society on both sides, and in hopes of helping those with family that are LGBTQ, that it doesn't mean we are aliens from the child they once knew. Reassure them so they can maybe be supportive at the same time, being true to their values.